I bought this repossessed Bugatti Veyron with supposedly a broken gearbox. Nothing happens, but we managed to solve the problem with just a tiny fuse.
There is a moment in every great story where the impossible becomes embarrassingly simple. Where the mountain that everyone said could not be climbed turns out to have a perfectly good elevator on the other side. This is one of those stories. And the reason it has sent shockwaves through the automotive world, rattled the boardrooms of one of the most prestigious car manufacturers on the planet, and turned a YouTube mechanic into something of a folk hero, is because it did not just happen once. It happened twice. Same brand. Same outcome. Different car. And the second time around, the fix cost £5. Let that sink in for a moment. £5. The price of a sandwich. The price of a coffee and a pastry at a motorway service station. £5 fixed a car that a billionaire walked away from. A car that the official manufacturer looked at, ran their diagnostics on, consulted their engineers about, and then handed back a repair estimate of £300,000. £300,000 versus £5. That gap, that enormous, almost comedic gap between those two numbers, is precisely why the internet has been losing its collective mind, and precisely why Bugatti finds itself in a position it absolutely did not want to be in. The man responsible for this embarrassment is Matt Armstrong. He runs a YouTube channel. He has a workshop. He has a team around him, a genuine passion for cars, and a philosophy that sounds simple but turns out to be revolutionary in practice. Start with the basics. Check the simple things first. Do not accept the official story until you have looked for yourself. That philosophy has made him famous. And it has made Bugatti very, very uncomfortable. To understand why this story matters so much, you need to understand what a Bugatti Veyron actually is. Not just in terms of performance, although the performance figures are genuinely staggering, but in terms of what it represents and what it costs to exist in the world. The Veyron arrived in 2005 and it changed everything. Before it, the idea of a road car producing over 1,000 horsepower was theoretical. Engineers talked about it. Concept cars hinted at it. But nobody had actually built one and sold it to the public. Bugatti did. They built a car with a W16 engine, which is essentially two V8 engines fused together into a single unit. They strapped 4 turbochargers onto that engine. They engineered an entirely bespoke 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox to handle the power. They built a chassis that could withstand the forces involved at 250 miles per hour. And then they sold it for approximately £1 million. Here is the part that most people do not know. Bugatti lost money on every single Veyron they sold. Estimates suggest the real cost of building each car was somewhere north of £5 million. They charged $1 million and absorbed the rest as the price of prestige, engineering reputation, and brand positioning. The Veyron was never a commercial product in the traditional sense. It was a statement. A proof of concept. A monument to what human engineering could achieve when money was no object and the brief was simply to build the fastest, most extraordinary road car ever made. When you frame it that way, a £300,000 repair bill almost makes sense. Almost. Because the car is extraordinary. The engineering is extraordinary. The gearbox alone is a masterpiece of mechanical complexity, managing the enormous torque output of that W16 engine and distributing power to all 4 wheels with precision that makes the car drivable rather than simply terrifying. If something goes wrong with that gearbox, you are dealing with technology that very few people on Earth fully understand. That is the narrative Bugatti has built. And for most Veyron owners, it has never been challenged. Because most Veyron owners are extraordinarily wealthy individuals who, when presented with a £300,000 repair bill, simply pay it or walk away. They do not question the diagnosis. They do not seek a second opinion. They trust the manufacturer because the manufacturer has built an entire culture of exclusivity and expertise around themselves. You do not argue with Bugatti about how to fix a Bugatti. That is not how it works. Until Matt Armstrong decided that was exactly how it works. The Veyron that Matt bought had a history that told a familiar story. It had developed a gearbox fault. The gearbox would not engage. You could start the car, hear that magnificent engine fire up, but the moment you tried to select a gear, nothing happened. The car sat in park and refused to move. The previous owner, not unreasonably, took it to people who knew about Bugattis. The diagnosis came back. Gearbox problem. Sealed unit. £300,000 to replace. The previous owner made a calculation that any sensible person would make. The car, even in perfect working condition, was not worth dramatically more than the repair bill. Spending £300,000 to fix it made no financial sense whatsoever. So they walked away. The car was repossessed. It went to auction. And because everyone in the room knew about the gearbox problem and everyone in the room accepted the £300,000 narrative, it sold for a fraction of its working value. Matt Armstrong bought it. He was not buying it blindly. He knew about the gearbox problem. He knew what Bugatti had said. He also knew, from years of experience buying and fixing cars that the official network had written off, that the official diagnosis is not always the final word. In fact, in his experience, the official diagnosis is often the beginning of the investigation, not the end of it. When Matt got the car back to his workshop, he did not immediately start pulling the gearbox apart. He did not order a replacement unit. He did not call Bugatti and ask them to confirm the quote. He did something far more methodical and far more revealing. He started at the beginning. He brought in a specialist named Ricky from IE Performance, who could connect to the car remotely through its diagnostic system and start reading what the various sensors and computers were actually reporting. What those diagnostics revealed was fascinating and, in hindsight, completely telling. The system was showing certain components as active and functioning when they were not functioning at all. The gearbox pressure pump was a perfect example. The diagnostic system reported that the command to activate the pump had been sent and received. According to the computer, the pump was running. But Matt was standing right next to the car, in a quiet workshop, and he could hear nothing. No pump noise. No pressure building. The silence was complete. This is a very specific and very important kind of fault. When the computer believes something is happening but physically nothing is happening, you are almost certainly dealing with an electrical supply problem. The command leaves the computer. The computer logs it as delivered. But somewhere between the computer and the component, the electrical circuit is broken. The component never actually receives the power it needs to operate. And the most common, most straightforward, most easily fixed cause of that kind of fault is a blown fuse. A fuse is one of the most elegantly simple inventions in electrical engineering. It is a piece of wire, calibrated to carry a specific amount of current, housed in a small plastic or ceramic body. When too much current flows through that wire, it melts. The circuit breaks. The power stops. This is intentional. This is the design. The fuse sacrifices itself to protect everything else in the circuit. A fuse blowing is not a failure of the system. It is the system working exactly as intended, telling you that something in that circuit has demanded more power than it should have. Every car has dozens of fuses. They live in fuse boxes, usually one under the bonnet and one inside the cabin. They are labeled, or at least they are supposed to be labeled, to tell you which circuit each one protects. Checking a fuse takes about 30 seconds. You pull it out, you look at it, you can see immediately whether the wire inside has melted or whether it is intact. Replacing a blown fuse costs almost nothing. The fuses themselves are sold in multi-packs for a few pounds at any car parts shop in the country. Given all of that, given that a blown fuse is the most common, most obvious, most easily checked cause of exactly the kind of fault the Veyron was displaying, you would expect that Bugatti's official diagnosis would have included checking the fuses. You would expect that before anyone mentioned a £300,000 gearbox replacement, someone would have spent 30 seconds with the fuse box. Apparently, that did not happen. Or if it did, the result was either missed or ignored. Because when Matt Armstrong opened the fuse box on that Veyron, he found exactly what should have been found months earlier by people who were being paid a great deal of money to diagnose the problem. What he found was not just a blown fuse. What he found was a story. A blown fuse tells you a circuit failed. But what Matt found told him that someone had known the circuit was failing and had responded to it in entirely the wrong way. The fuse in question was a 40-amp mini fuse. For anyone who is not familiar with fuse ratings, that number matters enormously. Standard mini fuses come in a range of common sizes. 10 amp, 15 amp, 20 amp, 25 amp, 30 amp. These cover the vast majority of automotive applications. 40 amp mini fuses are not a standard size. They are unusual. They exist, but you would not find one in a car from the factory unless there was a very specific reason for it to be there. The reason someone puts a non-standard, higher-rated fuse into a circuit where a lower-rated fuse keeps blowing is frustration combined with a fundamental misunderstanding of what fuses are for. If a 20-amp fuse keeps blowing in a particular circuit, the correct response is to ask why that circuit is drawing more than 20 amps. The correct response is to investigate the underlying cause of the excessive current draw. The wrong response, the dangerous response, is to simply install a higher-rated fuse and hope that one stays in longer. That is exactly what had happened to this car. The evidence was right there in the fuse box. Someone had fitted a 40-amp fuse where a much lower-rated fuse belonged. That fuse had eventually blown too. And now the car had no protection in that circuit at all, which meant the gearbox pressure pump had no power, which meant the gearbox could not build pressure, which meant the car would not shift out of park, which meant Bugatti looked at it and said £300,000. The chain of causation, once you lay it out, is almost painfully clear. And the fix, once you understand the chain, is equally clear. Matt removed the burnt-out fuse. He and his team supplied 12 volts directly to the circuit to confirm that the pump was physically capable of working. The moment they did, the pump fired up. It was not broken. It had never been broken. It had simply been starved of power. Matt then installed a correct specification fuse. 20 amps. Standard. The kind of fuse you can buy in a multipack for the price of a cup of tea. He installed it, and the pump activated. It built pressure. It reached the correct operating pressure. It shut off, which is exactly what it is supposed to do. Then Matt got into the car. He selected reverse. It engaged. He selected drive. It engaged. He went through every gear. Every single one worked perfectly. The car that had been declared beyond economical repair, the car that the previous owner had been told would cost £300,000 to fix, the car that had been repossessed and sold for a fraction of its value, was now fully operational because of a fuse that cost £5. The reaction to Matt's video was enormous, but the reaction within the automotive industry and from Bugatti's direction was something else entirely. Because this was not Matt's first time in this position. This was the second time he had done this to Bugatti. The first time involved a Chiron. The Bugatti Chiron is the successor to the Veyron. If the Veyron was extraordinary, the Chiron is extraordinary squared. More power. More technology. More exclusivity. A new one costs in the region of £2.5 million. When one gets damaged or develops a serious fault, the repair bills reflect that sticker price in the most brutal way imaginable. Matt bought a Chiron that had been declared a total loss. Written off by the insurance company. Sitting there as a monument to automotive expense and official helplessness. He fixed it. The process was longer and more complex than the Veyron job. It took months. It required genuine skill, genuine expertise, sourcing parts from places the official network would never think to look. Matt documented all of it on his channel. Every problem. Every solution. Every moment where something that was supposed to be impossible turned out to be merely difficult. The Chiron running again was a significant moment. His channel grew substantially off the back of it. The automotive world paid attention. And mate Rimac, who is the CEO of the Rimac Group, Bugatti's parent company, made his feelings known in the way that very online executives sometimes do. Comments suggesting that working on these cars outside the official network was irresponsible. That the complexity of the engineering meant only trained, approved specialists should touch them. The implication was clear. Matt Armstrong was an amateur playing with fire, and the official position was that he was doing something reckless. Then Matt bought the Veyron. And fixed it with a £5 fuse. The timing was not lost on anyone. The contrast between Rimac's comments about official expertise and the reality of what Matt had just demonstrated was exactly the kind of thing that the internet notices and does not quickly forget. If official expertise missed a blown fuse, what exactly is the official expertise being paid for?